As I was sitting down to get my seat, I noticed that a person came up to the front row, to the front right, sat down, and as credits were going, I know it seemed like he got a phone call. So he went out towards the emergency exit doorway, which I thought was unusual to take a phone call. And it seemed like he probably pried it open or probably did not let it latch all the way. Soon as the movie started, somebody came in, all black, gas mask, armor, and threw a gas can into the audience, and it went off, and then there was gunshots that took place.
You know, a trained psychiatric professional can put someone under hypnosis and tell them to commit certain acts very easily. For example, Sirhan Sirhan, who was blamed for the murder of Robert Kennedy, well, he was put under hypnosis several times by a psychiatrist in his jail cell where he reenacted the murder. I mean, they had him under complete hypnosis in under 10 minutes, and this was back in 1969, so you can imagine what government psychiatrists can do with mind control subjects and government patsies in our era. In fact, it looks like another shadow patsy has risen, and this time the mind control is connected to gun control. And of course, I am talking about the Batman massacre in Aurora, Colorado, which has resulted in damaging consequences on our struggle for gun rights. And recently, an alleged inmate of the Batman massacre culprit, James Holmes, he claims that the shooter told him he was programmed to carry out the massacre by an evil therapist. Now, I know this sounds like sci-fi movie or something straight out of Hollywood, but look, the CIA's use of mind control to create killers is a matter of historical record. So it's not sci-fi, it is a fact. We know about MK-Ultra, the covert and illegal CIA human research program, which, according to 14-year CIA veteran Victor Marchetti, the MK-Ultra program is still ongoing and has never really been abandoned. So was James Holmes, the Batman shooter, a victim of mind control? Was he a modern-day Manchurian candidate? For more on this, we go now to a special report by David Knight.
I'm David Knight with the InfoWars Nightly News. Now, yesterday, two related stories broke on Drudge Report and elsewhere nationally. The first one was from Infowars.com, and it talked about an update to the Batman shooter killings. Now, in that update, an inmate told by James Holmes that he was programmed to kill by an evil therapist. He felt like he was in a video game, and he said music from the soundtrack was a trigger for him to kill. Now, the other story concerns the death of a CIA scientist in 1953. Now, both sides agree that Dr. Frank Olson died from a fall through a closed window with the curtains drawn at the high-rise Statler Hotel. They also agree that he was given 9 days earlier a brandy that was laced with LSD in a CIA meeting. But after 60 years, Frank Olson's family has filed suit, alleging that the CIA murdered their father because he was going to resign. Why would he resign? Because he was horrified by the biological and chemical experiments that he had witnessed while working at the CIA. Now, a 2009 book titled A Terrible Mistake, The Murder of Frank Olson and the CIA's Secret Cold War Experiments by H.P. Albarelli does an excellent job of chronicling not only the death of Dr. Olson, but the key roles that Nazi war criminals and Japanese war criminals played in developing these programs for the CIA. It also discusses the origins of the MK-Ultra program and the assassination programs that the CIA created at that time. Now, one of the problems I have with the book is that it takes the naive position that these experiments have stopped. Really? Do we really have a kinder and gentler CIA? Well, yes, 20 years after Dr. Olson's murder, some of the dark secrets of the CIA were revealed during the Church Committee as well as the Rockefeller Commission hearings. You may recall then Director of the CIA, William Colby, demonstrating a heart attack gun.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
But the CIA and many in power at the time were very angry about that, and William Colby was replaced by George H.W. Bush. The Olson family had at that time been looking for justice for 20 years, and in the background some familiar names were obstructing that justice. Donald Rumsfeld was then the White House Chief of Staff, and Dick Cheney was a White House assistant. And it was discovered 10 years ago by a history researcher in the President Ford Library that the two of them were conspiring in memos to cover up Dr. Frank Olson's death. This is what they found in a memo between Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld. The Olson lawyers will seek to explore all the circumstances of Dr. Olson's employment, as well as those concerning his death. In any trial, it may become apparent that we're concealing evidence for national security reasons, and any settlement or judgment reached thereafter could be perceived as money paid to cover up the activities of the CIA. Well, in fact, they did pay money to the Olson family during the Ford administration. It was kind of hush money, but what the family really wanted was justice. What the family really wanted was truth. And there hasn't been a change of heart at the CIA. There really wasn't even a change of regime in power. Rumsfeld and Cheney were still players at the time of September 11th. And the Bushes had significant ties to bin Laden. Now, the book, A Terrible Mistake, does a great job of laying out the ruthless origins of these assassination and mind control programs, as well as biological and chemical weapons. It does a great job of explaining to people who may not have understood the origins of these programs and the parts that war criminals from Nazi Germany and from Japan played in this. But over the years, they have not backed off from these programs. Instead, they've continued to refine these programs so that today they're more adept at hiding them, as well as more sophisticated technologically. And just as they experimented and killed scientists who worked with them 60 years ago, they still experiment and use scientists who work with them, like James Holmes, the Batman shooter. I'm David Knight for InfoWars Nightly News.
Overnight, ABC News obtaining exclusive video and photographs of suspect James Holmes.
Hello, I'm James.
This is the first video released of the suspected shooter, recorded 6 years ago when Holmes was 18. Here he is standing in front of his peers at a science camp at Miramar College in San Diego, talking about what are called temporal illusions.
Over the course of the summer, I've been working with a temporal illusion. It's an illusion that allows you to change the past.
In the video, he appears slightly nervous speaking to the group, but he also appears intelligent. This is him explaining his mentor's shared interest in fantasy versus reality.
He also studies subjective experience, which is what takes place inside the mind, as opposed to the external world. I've carried on his work in dealing with subjective experience.
You have a right to remain silent. If you make any statements, they can be used against you.
The Denver shooting suspect James Holmes, who's 24, appears in court for the first time.
Any plea you make must be voluntary, not the result of any undue influence or coercion. Typically, you have a right to be advised of the charges. You have a right to be...
And what we need to do is change the way in which people think about guns, especially young people. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
The most hilarious ringtone ever. Just text PIG.
God hates fags. God hates fags.
We have a press that just gives them a free pass.
The boys were caught after setting the homeless man on fire.
Did you want the poop in my food? What? You
A tumor this size is very dangerous. Do you have any family? Oh, gotta take this.
My name is Chloe. I live in Virginia Beach, and everyone loves me because I'm so pretty.
I wanted an Escalade! This is the biggest day of my life, and you're up, Dad!
Hey, creepy. Isn't the schoolgirl thing a little played out?
Don't move and don't make a sound.
If you want the car, just take it. My parents got me the wrong one anyways.
Yeah, that's a fucking tragedy.
Did you just kill Chloe? Awesome. That was a fantastic start, but you know who else really rips my cock off? The Kardashians. People who use rock star as an adjective. Women who call their tits the girls. Anyone who wears crystals.
You're aiming at the bear, right?
This is the best day ever! Frank, don't. Let me.
I'm recording this. Thanks for turning off your cell phone.
You're welcome.
Why have a civilization if we're no longer interested in being civilized?
Hey, buddy, what's wrong?
A lot.
A lot of crazy people out there.
I only want to kill people who deserve to die.
We gonna do this or what?
I know it's not normal to want to kill, but I am no longer normal. I know it's not normal to want to kill, but I am no longer normal.
OnStar now offers a safer way to make calls on the road.
Personal calling.
Call Vicky Vale.
Hello?
Things are heating up.
Now, by the entire ABC network, Good Morning America was in progress in the East Coast and the Midwest, but we're joined by the entire network just to show you some pictures at the foot of New York City. This is at the World Trade Center. Obviously, a major fire there, and there has been some sort of explosion. We don't fully know the details.
A midnight showing of the Batman movie turned into a nightmare. Police are on the scene. Right now we know, as we said before, we were reporting 14 dead. We now believe there are only 12 dead. But I want to look at those hazmat teams going into the movie theater right now. Of course, there's blood on the scene, but also reports of smoke bombs, Amy, going off. So they're going to go in there and try and figure out exactly what that substance was.
That's right. And here's what we know right now. As you mentioned, the revised number, 12 dead, 50 injured. The youngest victim, just 3 months old. The suspect is in custody right now. We know he's a young man, 24 years old. Eyewitnesses describe him as armed for battle, a rifle, a handgun, a shotgun, and as George mentioned, smoke bombs. We're learning a lot more about the victims in the shooting as well, and we're about to hear from several eyewitnesses.
And their stories are just chilling. Our reporter is live on the scene right now. ABC's Clayton Sandell at the mall in Aurora, Colorado, where this horrifying scene unfolded just hours ago. Clayton?
Good morning, George. You're right. It is just a horrific scene here in Aurora, Colorado. This is a movie theater that is attached to basically a suburban mall here in Aurora. The theaters were packed for midnight showings of The Dark Knight. And when just after midnight, the movie had just gotten underway. And what we heard from witnesses were that there were parts of the movie where there was shooting, there was explosions, and all of a sudden, the shooting started for real.
Can you see by the dawn's early light?
You are as precious to me as you were to your own mother and father. I swore to them that I would protect you, and I haven't.
The mayor's gonna dump him in the spring. Really? Mm-hmm. But he's a hero, a war hero. This is peacetime.
You think this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. You and your friends better batten down the hatches. Because when it hits, you're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
What does that mean?
Rise.
Found just outside one of the theaters by police officers who apparently were able to respond rather quickly. He was found in possession of a gas mask, a rifle, and a handgun. And officers tell us that when he was taken into custody, he told them that he had some type of explosive device or devices, we're not sure exactly what, at his residence, an apartment building in North Aurora here in Colorado.
Which is now on lockdown.
Federal and local law enforcement are now en route there to evacuate the apartment building and try and figure out what they have at that scene.
Concerns today as the United Nations is now considering at this moment a global arms treaty that would curtail certain gun sales. Right now, the UN is working on a plan that would put a whole new set of international gun rules in place. Supporters, including the Obama administration, argue it will make the world more secure by tamping down on weapons commonly used by gangs and terrorists. But critics fear it would infringe on the Second Amendment right to bear arms right here in the United States. Larry Pratt is the executive director of Gun Owners of America, and KT McFarland is a Fox News national security analyst. Larry, let me start with you on this, because the human rights groups have convinced the Obama administration to sort of reverse what had been U.S. policy when it comes to this proposed treaty, and to go into the United Nations and support it, because they argue that human rights violations nationwide or worldwide are the result in part of some very bad guys getting their hands on some guns, and we need to have more regulation of international gun sales. How does that affect the Second Amendment right here at home?
Well, it would completely work against what the Second Amendment is intended to do, but it doesn't seem that the Constitution is much of an obstacle or a problem for this administration. But nevertheless, shall not be infringed is something that a treaty can't trump. The very language in the Constitution dealing with treaty making says that the treaties have to be made under the authority of the United States. And if we, the people, haven't given authority for gun control to the United States, to the federal government, then its hands are tied. And at a practical level, I think even Harry Reid's Senate would look at that treaty if it's presented to them and say, this is toxic. I'm not going there in an election year.
The gun lobby has a lot of power, KT, a lot of power. Just look at once the NRA decided to score that Holder contempt vote, you had like 24 Democrats almost immediately come over the other side of the aisle. So these lawmakers do pay attention to what the gun lobby wants. It doesn't want this treaty. But why? I still fail to understand exactly how it's going to affect Americans and the Second Amendment, as opposed to, because, the folks who are proposing this want us to believe that this is only an international thing that's going to stop, genocide in other countries because we're going to take away their guns.
Look, everybody wants to stop genocide in other countries. That's not the point. Look at how capable has the United Nations been so far at stopping Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran has agreed to an international treaty, but we can't stop Iran. Iran's cheating. It's building a nuclear weapons program, and we have no ability to enforce it. We can't even go and inspect what they're doing. So the idea that the United States would cede its national sovereignty to an international organization that's going to somehow verify and prevent every country in the world from running guns to other countries, it's just not going to happen. Why? Because the United States will abide by it the same way we abide by the international arms control agreements on the development of nuclear weapons. Who's not going to agree to it is countries like Iran. Is Iran going to really stop gun running to Hamas, to Syria? No. And so you'll be left with a world that's not safer. In fact, it will have the absolute opposite effect of what the intention is. It will make the world a much less safe place.
Larry, what do you think is really going on here then, since we've had a reversal in terms of, I guess, from the Bush administration to the Obama administration? Why? Is this a political issue, or why would the Obama administration be supporting this?
It reflects the incredibly strong ideological commitment to control in general, and in guns in particular, of this administration. What they're seeking is not going to be ratified by a Senate, but what I suspect they will try to do, because we've seen it in other areas of federal governing, is declare that whatever it might be, registration, prohibition of certain calibers of firearms, they'll just try to put that into effect administratively, even though they have no authority. That hasn't stopped them anywhere else where they've wanted to go.
KT, the UN agreement, the treaty, if it is accepted, would hold nations accountable through legally binding rules. Countries that sign it are going to have to pass laws to ensure that the weapons companies here in the United States, for example, abide by this treaty. So could you have American gun manufacturers being cited for non-compliance by the United Nations? I mean, is there a conflict there between the potential treaty and the Second Amendment?
Well, absolutely. You know, United States laws remain supreme in the United States. Our laws are not secondary to international laws, to UN laws. And then you would have a situation where the United Nations is looking at American domestic gun manufacturers and sanctioning them. You know, again, go back and look at how successful the United Nations has been in any time they've done this sort of thing. The other thing I would say is look at how incompetent the United States has been controlling weapons. I mean, look at Fast and Furious. We couldn't even keep track of those guns. We somehow expect the United Nations is going to keep track of hundreds of thousands, millions of firearms, and assume that there's there's no enforcement mechanism, even if it were a good idea.
Larry Pratt, KT McFarland, thank you both.